The sun was just beginning to lift itself over the red ridges of the Apache plains, spilling golden fire across the sleeping earth. The tribe stirred quietly, smoke rising from cooking fires, the low hum of morning chants echoing in the distance. Among them was Koa, a young warrior whose name meant brave spirit. At 21, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of men twice his age. His shoulders were broad from years of hunting, his hands scarred from the shaping of spears and bows. Yet beneath that strength was something most could not see, a deep silence that had followed him all his life. Koa had never touched a woman, not out of fear nor pride, but out of reverence. From the time he was a boy, his mother had taught him that a woman's spirit was sacred, not to be taken or even approached without purpose. And when she died, her words lived on in him like prayer beads strung inside his heart. He had seen other warriors, laughing, teasing, boasting of their conquests by the campfire. But Koa would always sit apart, sharpening his blade or staring into the flames as though searching for meaning in their flicker. His people respected him, but they also pitied him. The boy was born for war, the old medicine woman once said, not for love. Yet, even Koa sometimes wondered what it would feel like. The warmth of another's hand, the sound of laughter meant only for him, the simple grace of closeness. He had fought battles, tracked deer through storm and dust, faced death without trembling. But the idea of love unsettled him in a way no enemy ever had. His father, Chief Nantan, had once told him, "A warrior's strength is not only in his bow or blade, but in his heart. You must learn both, my son." Koa had tried, but the ways of the heart were strange and untamed. No path to follow, no weapon to guide him. So he built his life around solitude, believing it safer to fight storms than feelings. That morning, as he rode along the canyon edge, the desert wind brushed against his skin, carrying scents of mesquite and sage. His black stallion, Tala, moved easily under him, hooves whispering across the sand. In the distance, vultures circled low. Koa frowned. Something was wrong. He pressed his heels into Tala's side and galloped toward the smoke curling in the horizon. When he reached the ridge, he saw what the wind had hidden: a broken wagon, splintered wheels half buried in sand, and scattered belongings glinting under the sun. Cautiously, he dismounted. The desert was cruel to strangers. Often, white settlers wandered into Apache lands, some lost, others seeking trouble. But as Koa approached, he noticed signs of distress, tracks of a small boot, a woman's shawl tangled in cactus spines, a blood-stained rag lying in the dust. "Someone lives," he murmured, crouching low. Following the tracks, he descended into the shadowed canyon. The air was still heavy with heat. Then faintly he heard it, a cry, weak and trembling, carried by the wind. His heart kicked hard. He ran toward the sound. There, half hidden beneath the wreck of the wagon, lay a woman. Her dress was torn, her face pale beneath streaks of dust and blood. She looked barely conscious, one hand reaching weakly toward him before falling again. Koa froze. He had never been this close to a woman outside his tribe, much less one who looked so fragile, so human. The world seemed to pause around him. The wind stopped, the vultures vanished, and all he could hear was her shallow breathing. His pulse thundered in his ears. The sacred teaching of his mother echoed within him. Touch only with purpose. He knelt beside her, hands shaking slightly. For the first time in his life, he broke his own rule. Gently, reverently, he lifted her into his arms. Her body was light, trembling, warm against his chest. Her lips moved faintly as she whispered something he couldn't understand. In that moment, something shifted inside him. The warrior who had known only silence felt the stir of something new, a tenderness he could neither name nor control. As the desert wind rose again, Koa looked down at the woman and realized his life, built on solitude, was about to change forever. The desert storm came like a spirit unleashed, screaming winds, walls of sand twisting through the canyon like furious ghosts. Koa had seen storms before, but this one felt different. The sky darkened to a deep copper, the air charged with a strange energy, and every grain of dust seemed alive with warning. He tightened his grip on the unconscious woman he had found beneath the wrecked wagon. Her head rested against his chest, her breath shallow but steady. The wind stung his face as he searched for shelter, scanning the ridges until he spotted a break in the rock, a small hollow carved by centuries of rain and time. "Hold on," he muttered softly. Though he knew she couldn't hear him, the horse Tala followed close as Koa pushed through the blinding grit. Each step was a battle against the storm's rage, his long hair whipping across his face, sand biting into his eyes. He shielded the woman with his body, his broad frame taking the full force of the wind. When they finally reached the cave, he stumbled inside, breathless. Inside, the world fell silent. Only the faint howl of wind remained, echoing from the canyon walls. Koa laid the woman down gently on a bed of dry brush and covered her with his cloak. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, this stranger who had appeared like a dream from the dust. She was unlike any woman he had ever seen. Her skin was pale, her hair the color of sunlit wheat tangled and filled with sand. Her hands were small and delicate, marked by blisters and scratches. She looked fragile, yes, but there was also something fierce beneath the exhaustion on her face, something unbroken. Koa dipped his canteen and pressed a few drops of water to her lips. She stirred faintly, her eyelids fluttering open. When her gaze finally met his, he froze. Her eyes were the color of the morning sky, clear, searching, alive. Where am I?" she whispered weakly. Koa hesitated before replying, his English slow and careful. "Safe. Storm outside." Her lips trembled as she looked around the cave, then back at him. "You saved me?" He nodded once, unsure what else to say. She studied his face for a moment, his dark eyes, his long hair, the quiet strength in the way he held himself. "You're Apache," she said softly, half in awe, half in fear. He didn't respond right away. Her tone wasn't cruel, only uncertain. "Yes," he said finally. "I am." The woman swallowed hard, her throat dry. "My name is Evelyn," she managed to say. "Evelyn Ward, I was traveling west. My wagon—" Her voice cracked. "I saw," he said simply. "I thought I was going to die out there," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "The others. They left me when the storm came." Koa felt something twist inside him, an unfamiliar ache that wasn't anger but something deeper. No one deserved to be abandoned like that. "You live now," he said quietly. "Storm will pass." Evelyn gave a faint, trembling smile. "Thanks to you." For the first time in years, Koa didn't know where to look. He busied himself feeding the small fire he'd built at the mouth of the cave. Shadows danced over the stone walls and the scent of burning sage filled the air. Evelyn watched him work, his movements careful, almost graceful, his silence speaking louder than words. After a while, she whispered, "I didn't think men like you still existed." Koa looked up, confused. "Men like me?" "Kind," she said simply. "Strong, but kind." He felt the heat rise in his face, unfamiliar and disarming. No one had ever spoken to him that way, not even among his own people. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly. The storm still howled outside, and between them hung a fragile, unspoken understanding. When the wind began to die down, Evelyn's eyes grew heavy. She drifted to sleep, wrapped in his cloak, her breathing calm and even. Koa watched her for a long time, the firelight flickering across her features. He didn't understand why his chest felt tight or why he couldn't look away. All he knew was that this stranger, the woman he had found in the dust, had already unsettled something deep within him. And as he sat awake through the night, guarding her from the storm's fading wrath, Koa realized he wasn't just protecting a lost traveler. He was protecting the first piece of his heart he had ever given away. When dawn broke, the storm had spent itself. The desert lay quiet again, golden and endless, its fury washed away by sunlight. The canyon walls shimmered, their sharp edges softened by a faint morning haze. Inside the small rock shelter, Koa stirred the ashes of the fire, adding dry twigs to coax the warmth back to life. Beside him, Evelyn slept, curled beneath his dark cloak. Her breathing was steady now. Strands of blonde hair lay across her face, dusted with sand. Koa found himself watching her in silence, the same way one might watch a sunrise, careful not to disturb it, afraid it might vanish. He had seen many faces, warriors, chiefs, hunters, but never one that held such softness. There was something in the way her brow furrowed even in sleep, as if she carried the weight of the world within her. He wondered what kind of life she had come from, what dreams had led her into the wild where she nearly died. When she stirred, Koa turned away quickly, busying himself by tending to Tala, his horse. Evelyn blinked against the sunlight, confusion clouding her face for a moment before memory returned. She sat up slowly, clutching the cloak around her. "The storm's gone," she said softly. "Yes." Koa replied, his deep voice calm. You rest more. Still weak. Evelyn shook her head, trying to stand, but pain shot through her ankle. She winced, gripping the cave wall for support. Instantly, Koa was beside her. You hurt, he said. Let me see. She hesitated, pride flickering in her eyes, but the concern in his face disarmed her. Carefully, she sat on a flat stone while he knelt before her. His hands, large and rough from years of work, moved with surprising gentleness as he examined her ankle. It's swollen, he murmured, almost to himself. He fetched a strip of cloth from his saddlebag and began to wrap it with practiced care. Evelyn watched him, curious. You've done this before, she said. He nodded once. Many times. For warriors. For horses. Same pain, she smiled faintly. Then I'm in good hands. Koa's lips twitched as though her words amused him, but he didn't reply. When he finished, he rose to his feet and offered her water. Their fingers brushed as she took the canteen, and the touch sent a faint shiver through both of them. Thank you, she whispered. Koa looked away, pretending to busy himself with the fire again. You will stay here until strong, he said. Then I take you north to trail. Evelyn sipped the water, watching him over the rim of the canteen. You don't talk much, do you? He glanced at her, one eyebrow lifting slightly. Words not always needed. She smiled again, soft and genuine this time. You sound like my father. He used to say silence tells more truth than talking ever could. Koa didn't know what to say, but her tone warmed something in him. They spent the rest of the morning in quiet company. Koa roasted a small rabbit he had caught at dawn and shared it with her. She thanked him between bites, still amazed by how calm he seemed in this harsh wilderness that nearly killed her. As the day stretched on, Evelyn grew stronger, her voice steadier. She asked about his people, the land, the symbols carved into the walls of the cave. He answered in short, careful sentences, his accent thick but his eyes patient. When she spoke of her life in the East, of teaching children and reading stories by lamplight, Koa listened with an almost childlike fascination. I can read you something. If you like, she offered, noticing his quiet interest. He looked at her curiously. Read? Yes. She reached into her torn satchel and pulled out a small worn book, the only thing she had saved from the wreck. She opened it gently and began to read aloud. Her voice filled the cave, soft and rhythmic, like the wind moving through leaves. Koa didn't understand all the words, but he understood the feeling. The rise and fall of her tone soothed him, the sound wrapping around them both like a warm blanket. When she finished, the silence that followed felt sacred. That story, Koa said finally. It feels like dream. Evelyn looked at him and smiled. Maybe that's what stories are for, to remind us how to dream even in places like this. For the first time in many years, Koa smiled back. A quiet, fleeting curve of the lips, but real. The desert outside was vast and empty, but inside the cave something new was beginning to bloom. Fragile, uncertain, yet undeniably alive. Neither of them said it aloud, but both felt it. The storm had passed, but something far more powerful had just begun. Days passed, and the canyon became their quiet world. A place of wind-carved stone, the whisper of desert birds, and the slow healing of two lost souls. The storm that had nearly taken Evelyn's life had also given her something unexpected, the company of a man unlike any she had ever known. Koa spoke little, yet his silence was not cold. It carried a strange comfort, a sense of safety that words could never offer. Evelyn found herself studying him. The way he moved with purpose, how his eyes seemed to read the earth like a language only he understood. When he hunted, he returned with food and always shared the best part with her. When she shivered at night, he silently built the fire higher, his actions speaking in ways his tongue could not. One morning, as sunlight poured through the canyon, Evelyn sat at the mouth of the cave, brushing the sand from her skirt. Koa was nearby, sharpening his knife against a stone. She glanced at him, hesitated, then smiled shyly. I wish I knew how to thank you, she said. Koa paused, looking up. You already do, he answered softly. How? You live. The simplicity of his words struck her deeper than any speech could. She bit her lip, then asked, Do you always speak like that? Short and true? He considered this, a faint smirk touching his lips. Better than long and empty. Evelyn laughed, lightly at first, then freely. The sound echoed across the canyon, and Koa looked at her as though hearing laughter for the first time. Something inside him shifted. He liked that sound. He wanted to hear it again. Their days settled into a rhythm. Evelyn's ankle healed slowly under Koa's care. In return, she began to teach him bits of English. Small words, phrases he repeated with careful precision. "This," she said one afternoon, pointing to herself, "is a woman." "Woman," he repeated, the word rolling strangely off his tongue. "And you are a man." He raised a brow, slightly amused. "I know that one." Evelyn laughed again. "Then maybe we'll start with something harder." She picked up a pebble and held it up. "Stone? Stone?" he echoed. She pointed to the sky. "Blue," he nodded. "Sky blue." Then with a gesture toward her eyes, he added quietly, "Like yours." Evelyn froze. It was the first time he'd said something so personal. His tone wasn't flirtatious, it was simply true, spoken like a man stating what he saw. Still, the words made her heart flutter unexpectedly. She looked down quickly, pretending to be busy with her book. "You're learning fast," she murmured. Koa tilted his head slightly. "You teach well." That evening they shared roasted quail beneath a violet sky. The desert glowed faintly under the rising moon. After eating, Evelyn began teaching him to write his name in the sand. He struggled at first, drawing awkward shapes with his finger until the letters finally took form. Koa. She smiled. "Perfect." He looked at the letters for a long time. "Now you," he said. Evelyn hesitated, then bent beside him, their shoulders nearly touching as she wrote her name, Evelyn. Koa studied it with quiet reverence. Then carefully he drew a single line between their names in the sand. "Together," he said simply. The gesture stole her breath. It was innocent yet deeply meaningful. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering in the silver light. For a moment neither spoke. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the canyon and the quiet rhythm of their hearts finding a shared pace. That night, as Evelyn lay awake beneath his cloak, she realized she no longer feared the wilderness. It wasn't the land that had changed, it was her heart. Somewhere between his quiet strength and her soft words, a bridge had formed, and on the other side of that bridge, trust had begun to grow. Koa, sitting by the fire, watched her silhouette in the flickering light. He didn't understand what was happening between them, only that when she smiled, his chest felt lighter. He touched the letters they had written in the sand before sleep and whispered her name like a prayer. Evelyn. It was a name he would not forget. The days that followed were painted in soft colors. Sunlight spilling through the canyon, the hush of wind moving through dry sage, and the quiet companionship that had taken root between them. Evelyn's ankle had grown stronger, though she still leaned on Koa when she walked over uneven ground. She no longer felt fear in his presence. Instead, she found herself drawn to the calm in his eyes, the patience in his movements, the gentleness behind his silence. That morning, the sky was a pale blue bowl stretching over miles of golden sand. Evelyn insisted on gathering water from a spring Koa had found nearby. He tried to object, telling her to rest, but she only smiled and said, "If I'm to make it back to the world, I'll have to stand on my own feet again." Koa admired her spirit. Without another word, he walked beside her. The trail wound through narrow stone walls where sunlight streamed in narrow beams. They reached the spring, a clear pool hidden between two cliffs fed by water seeping from the rock. Evelyn knelt to fill the small tin canteen, her reflection rippling in the water. But when she rose to her feet, her ankle gave way. A sharp cry escaped her lips as she lost balance. Koa reacted instantly. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms locking around her waist. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen, her face inches from his, the scent of her hair mingling with the dry air. Evelyn's breath came shallowly. Her palms rested against his chest, feeling the rapid, solid beat of his heart beneath the leather and skin. His warmth surrounded her, unfamiliar yet strangely safe. You caught me," she whispered. Koa's voice was low, almost hoarse. "Could not let you fall?" Her gaze searched his, the closeness stirring something deep within her. "You've never been this close to a woman before, have you?" she asked softly, her voice more curious than teasing. He hesitated, eyes darkening with a flicker of shyness. "No," he admitted. "Not like this." Evelyn smiled faintly. Then you're doing very well. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted it to his face, brushing a strand of hair from his cheek. Koa didn't move. He had been taught all his life to be in control, to master fear, hunger, pain. But nothing had prepared him for this quiet moment of tenderness. The warmth of her touch seemed to melt every barrier he had built around himself. You saved me, she said softly. You took care of me without asking for anything. You don't have to be afraid of gentleness, Koa. I am not afraid, he replied, though his voice was barely a whisper. Just not used to it. Her thumb traced the line of his jaw, gentle as breath. Then let me teach you. Koa didn't understand what she meant, not entirely, but the look in her eyes told him enough. It wasn't lust that passed between them. It was trust, pure and quiet. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he let himself feel what he had denied for so long. For a long moment, they simply stood there, two souls suspended between silence and heartbeat, between the past that had shaped them and the present that held them still. The desert around them was utterly still, as if watching. Finally, Evelyn pulled back slightly, though her hand lingered against his arm. Help me sit, she said. He guided her gently to a rock by the spring, kneeling beside her. She smiled, brushing away the embarrassment of her fall. You're kind, Koa. Kinder than most men I've known. Koa looked down at his hands, then at her. Kindness, he said quietly, is not weakness. My mother said it is strength. Evelyn nodded slowly, her heart full. She was right. For a while they said nothing more. The water shimmered beside them, reflecting their faces, his strong and solemn, hers soft and luminous. Something unspoken had passed between them, something that no language could define. As the sun began to sink low in the sky, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and rose, Evelyn looked at him once more and said, I think the world made us meet for a reason. Koa's eyes held hers, steady and unreadable, yet filled with emotion. Maybe reason is not always needed, he said quietly. Maybe it just is, she smiled through the warmth rising in her chest. That day she realized she had touched more than his hand or his heart. She had touched the quiet soul of a man who had never known love's language. And in that single moment beside the spring, both of them understood. Something had begun that neither could stop, nor fully name. The night came softly, as if afraid to disturb them. A half-moon hung above the canyon, silver light spilling over the rocks. The desert, once fierce and endless, now felt like a sanctuary, a world made small by the warmth of a campfire and the quiet presence of two souls who had found comfort in each other's company. Koa sat by the fire, sharpening his knife with slow rhythmic strokes. Sparks drifted upward, carried by the wind like fireflies. Across from him, Evelyn watched the flames, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of warm water. She had begun to heal. Her ankle no longer throbbed. Her fear no longer ruled her, but a new kind of restlessness stirred in her chest. They had grown close in ways she couldn't have imagined when he first found her. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It was alive with meaning. Each glance, each gesture carried a message neither needed to speak aloud. Yet there were words inside her that begged to be said. Koa, she murmured. He looked up from the fire, eyes steady and patient. Yes, do you ever wonder about what your life might be if things were different? If you didn't have to be so alone all the time? Koa's hand paused mid-motion. The question struck deeper than she realized. He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. A warrior does not ask what could be, he said quietly. He accepts what is. Evelyn tilted her head, her gaze soft. That sounds like something you were taught to believe, not something you truly feel. His eyes flicked toward her. You think I lie? She smiled faintly. No, I think you're too honest to lie. But maybe you've hidden truth from yourself for so long you can't see it. Koa frowned slightly, setting the knife aside. The firelight painted his face in shifting gold and shadow. In my people's way, he said slowly. A man must earn silence before he earns speech. I have lived in that silence many years. It is safe, Evelyn's voice softened. Safe isn't the same as happy. Her words lingered in the air between them. For a while, neither spoke. The fire cracked softly, the scent of sage drifting through the night. Finally, Koa exhaled, his shoulders lowering, as if letting go of a burden he had carried too long. When I was a boy, he began quietly. My mother said love makes a man strong, but I did not believe her. My father was chief. He had power, land, warriors, But my mother died young. He never looked at another woman again. I thought love was a wound you never stopped bleeding from. Evelyn listened, her heart aching at the honesty in his voice. And now? She asked gently. He met her eyes. Now, I'm not sure what to believe. You are different. You speak to me and I hear things I never heard before. I look at you and the silence feels alive. For a moment, the night seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn felt her eyes sting, not from sadness, but from the simple, unguarded truth of his words. She leaned forward slightly, her voice trembling. I used to think love was pain too, she confessed. I was engaged once to a man back east. He promised me the world, but when my father died, he left. Said he couldn't build a life with someone burdened by grief. Koa's expression darkened, not in anger, but in empathy. He was not strong enough. No, she said softly, shaking her head. He wasn't. I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But when you found me, when you stayed with me, even though you didn't have to, you made me feel something I thought was gone. Her voice broke slightly. Safe. The fire crackled between them. Koa reached out, hesitant at first, then placed his hand over hers. His touch was warm, solid, grounding. She looked up, meeting his gaze. I do not know what love truly is, he said quietly. But when I look at you, I think maybe I am learning. Her breath caught. And when I look at you, she whispered, I remember what it feels like to trust. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and silent. No words followed, none were needed. The confession had already been made, not in language, but in the quiet press of hands, in the steady rhythm of two hearts that had finally found their way to each other. And for the first time, Koa, who had lived by strength and silence, felt something greater than either, peace. The morning came soft and golden, carrying with it a peace that neither of them could quite name. The canyon felt gentler somehow, the wind less harsh, the light warmer. Evelyn awoke to find Koa sitting by the cave entrance, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The first rays of sun caught in his long black hair, turning it to bronze. For a moment she simply watched him. There was stillness in him, a quiet strength that spoke louder than words. Yet now she knew the silence wasn't made of distance. It was made of thought, of care. Something in him had opened since their talk by the fire. She could feel it in the air between them. Good morning, she said softly. Koa turned his head, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Good, he replied, his English growing smoother every day. She sat up, pulling his cloak tighter around her shoulders. You've been awake long? All night, he said simply, watching the sky. Evelyn's brow furrowed slightly. You didn't sleep? He shook his head, then looked back toward the east. You told me last night, trust, he said slowly, choosing each word carefully. In my people's way, when someone teaches something sacred, we give a gift in return. I wanted to bring you something. He stood and walked to the mouth of the cave. From a leather pouch he pulled a small polished stone, pale as the moon and smooth to the touch. He placed it in her palm, his hand covering hers for a brief, warm moment. It is river stone, he said. From place where I first learned to track deer with my father, it means remembrance, for what is taught from the heart. Evelyn's throat tightened. It's beautiful. He shrugged slightly. It is only stone. No, she said gently, curling her fingers around it. It's everything. Their eyes met, and in that look, an entire conversation passed between them. Gratitude, wonder, and a tenderness neither dared speak aloud. As the day went on, Koa showed her how to move quietly through the canyon, how to listen to the earth rather than fight it. He taught her to read the wind by how it brushed the grass, to tell time by the shadow of stone, and to find comfort in silence. Evelyn, in turn, taught him things that were just as simple, yet just as sacred. She showed him laughter. She showed him patience when he stumbled over new English words. She showed him that strength didn't always come from stillness. Sometimes it came from letting oneself feel. At midday they sat by the spring. Evelyn dipped her feet in the cool water, the hem of her dress fluttering in the warm breeze. Koa knelt beside her, his hand trailing lazily in the pool, I think, she said softly, we've both been taught wrong about love. Koa's gaze lifted to hers. Wrong? Yes. We think love is something you have to chase, or win, or deserve. But maybe. She smiled faintly, eyes on the water. Maybe love is what happens when two people finally stop running. He considered this for a long time. My mother used to say love is like rain. It does not ask the mountain if it may fall. It just falls. Evelyn's lips parted in quiet awe. Then maybe I've been standing in the rain all along and didn't realize it. Koa looked at her, the corner of his mouth turning upward in a rare, soft smile. You feel rain now? She met his gaze, her heart steady. Every time you look at me. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the air between them thick with something wordless. Then, gently, she reached out and touched his face. No hesitation this time. Her fingers brushed his jaw, then rested over his heart. Koa didn't move away. Instead, he lifted his own hand and placed it over hers. I thought love was danger, he said quietly, that it would make me weak. But you show me. It makes me alive. Her eyes shimmered. And you make me brave. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling, hearts beating in quiet harmony. No promise was spoken, no vows exchanged. They didn't need them. The world itself seemed to bear witness, the wind whispering through the canyon, the water glinting like light through tears. In that sacred stillness, Koa learned what love really was. Not possession, not passion alone, but presence. The knowing that even silence could hold two hearts together. And as the sun dipped lower, their shadows merged into one. The peace they had found in the canyon lasted for 3 more days, quiet, golden days filled with gentle laughter and the soft rhythm of healing. Evelyn's ankle was nearly strong again, and Koa had begun to smile more easily. They cooked together over the fire, shared stories in broken words and gestures, and slept beneath the same stars that seemed to listen in silence. But peace, like a fragile thread, can break with the slightest pull. On the 4th morning, Koa awoke before dawn. Something in the wind felt wrong. The desert air, normally crisp and dry, was thick with the scent of smoke. His instincts sharpened instantly. He moved silently to the edge of the ridge, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. Far to the east, beyond the mesas, a thin trail of black smoke curled upward. It was no campfire. It was a signal. His jaw tightened. White riders. He had seen such signals before. Soldiers or bounty men hunting through Apache lands. They never came alone, and they never came in peace. He turned quickly and found Evelyn still asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light. For a long moment he stood there, torn between the warrior he had always been and the man he was becoming. The warrior knew he should leave, move fast, vanish before they were seen. But the man couldn't imagine walking away from her. He knelt beside her and touched her shoulder gently. Evelyn, he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. Koa. Wake. We must go. She blinked, still half dreaming. Go? Why? Men are coming, he said. Riders, maybe soldiers. We cannot stay. Her confusion gave way to fear. Soldiers? Are they looking for you? He hesitated. Maybe you. Maybe both. She sat up quickly, heart racing. But I thought, they come for land, for people, for power, he said grimly. They see Apache and think enemy. Within minutes they had packed what little they had. Koa led her through a narrow ravine that wound deeper into the canyon, hidden beneath overhanging stone. The air grew cooler, the shadows deeper. He moved like smoke, silent, sure. Evelyn followed close behind, trusting every step he took. As they walked, she tried to steady her breathing. Koa, she whispered, if they find us, what will they do? His expression didn't change. You are a white woman, they will not harm you. And you? He didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. They reached a narrow outcrop overlooking the canyon floor. From there, they could see the riders, 5 of them, making their way along the dry riverbed below. Dust rose around their horses' hooves. Even from a distance, Evelyn could see the glint of rifles slung across their backs. "They're searching," she whispered. Koa nodded. "They follow trail. They found our old camp." Panic clawed at her chest. "We have to hide." He turned toward her, voice calm but firm. "You hide. I draw them away." "No," she said sharply, grabbing his arm. "You can't." He looked at her then, and she saw it in his eyes. The old warrior, the protector, the man who would rather face danger than let it touch her. "If they see you with me," he said quietly, "they will think you are taken. They will not listen. You will be in danger too." Her voice trembled. "Then I'll stay by your side." He shook his head. "You once said love is what happens when we stop running. But now you must run. For me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I won't lose you, Koa." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You won't. I will find you. Always." She leaned into his touch, memorizing his warmth, his scent, the strength in his hands. Then reluctantly she nodded. Koa guided her toward a hollow beneath a ledge, covering the entrance with brush. "Stay until night. Do not move." He stepped back, their eyes locking one last time. No words passed between them, only the unspoken promise of return. Then he was gone, moving down the ridge with the silent grace of a predator. From her hiding place, Evelyn pressed her fist to her mouth to stifle a sob. She could see him only as a shadow among shadows, slipping closer to the riders below. The wind carried faint echoes, the sound of a whistle, the crack of a rifle, the cry of startled horses. And then, silence. Evelyn's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She wanted to run to him, to scream his name, but she couldn't. All she could do was wait, trembling in the darkness, praying that somewhere in the smoke and dust Koa was still alive. The canyon had fallen eerily silent. Not even the wind dared to whisper. Evelyn crouched beneath the ledge, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she strained to hear something, anything, that would tell her Koa was alive. The minutes dragged like hours, the weight of uncertainty pressing down until she thought she might burst. Then came the echo of hooves. She peeked through a gap in the rocks, heart hammering. Down below, the riders had stopped. 2 dismounted and crouched by the riverbed, studying the ground. The leader, a tall man in a gray coat and wide-brimmed hat, pointed toward the rocks where Koa had gone. Evelyn's stomach clenched. She saw him then, Koa, a lone figure standing at the mouth of the canyon, exposed under the harsh sun. His bow was drawn, muscles tense. He was outnumbered 5-1. Her hand flew to her mouth. "No, Koa." The man in the gray coat raised his rifle. "Hold it right there, Injun." His voice carried up the canyon walls. "Ain't nowhere to run." Koa didn't move. "No need to run," he said in his low, steady voice. "You leave this place." The leader laughed, spitting into the dust. "You must be out of your mind. You're sitting on federal land. You and whatever woman you're hiding are coming with us." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "They know I'm here." Koa's bowstring drew tighter. "The woman is under my protection," he said. "You will not touch her." That made the man grin wider. "Under your protection? Well, ain't that sweet?" He nodded to the others. "Fan out. We'll see how long he keeps talking brave when she's crying for him." The moment the riders spread, Koa loosed his arrow. It struck one man square in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. The others fired back in chaos, bullets echoing across the canyon like thunder. Evelyn bit her lip until she tasted blood, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to scream, to run to him, but she knew he had told her to stay for a reason. Koa moved like a spirit of the desert, swift, unseen. He rolled behind a boulder, loosing another arrow that shattered a man's rifle. But he was only one man, and their gunfire was relentless. A bullet grazed his arm, tearing through the flesh. He didn't cry out, but Evelyn saw him stagger. "Come on, Koa," she whispered, trembling. "Please, please." Then one of the riders spotted her. "There, up in them rocks." Before she could react, 2 men broke off and began climbing toward her hiding place. Evelyn's heart lurched. Koa saw it too. His head snapped up, eyes blazing. He dropped his bow, drew his knife, and sprinted toward the rock wall, straight into gunfire. The world exploded in sound. Shots cracked through the air, dust flying up around him. One bullet caught him in the side, but he didn't stop. He slammed into the nearest rider with full force, sending both tumbling into the dust. His blade flashed once, swift and final. The second rider aimed his pistol at Koa's back. Evelyn screamed, "No!" The distraction gave Koa just enough time to twist, the bullet grazing past his ribs. He lunged forward, knocking the gun from the man's hand. A moment later, the canyon fell still again. Evelyn clambered down the rocks, sobbing. "Koa!" He turned toward her, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped through his fingers. "You weren't supposed to come," he said softly. She fell to her knees beside him, tears streaking her face. "You weren't supposed to fight alone." He gave a faint, pained smile. "I never fight alone now." She tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it to his wound, hands shaking. "Stay with me, Koa, please." He reached up, brushing her hair from her face. His hand trembled, but his eyes were calm. "Do not cry, Evelyn. You taught me something. Love is not pain. It is worth the pain." Her tears fell onto his hand. "Don't say goodbye. You promised you'd find me." He smiled faintly. "I found you already." For a moment, the canyon seemed to stop breathing. The wind whispered across the rocks, carrying the smell of sage and smoke. Evelyn held him close, her hand stained with his blood, refusing to let go. Then in the distance came another sound, the thunder of hooves. "More riders!" Her head snapped up, panic surging again. But Koa's grip on her hand tightened weakly. "Go," he whispered. "Live." She shook her head, sobbing. "I won't leave you." His voice was barely a breath. "If you love me, you must." And before she could answer, his eyes fluttered closed. Evelyn's scream echoed across the canyon, raw and wordless, a sound that carried all the love and loss the desert could hold. The sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and blood red. The wind carried the scent of smoke, dust, and sorrow. Evelyn knelt where Koa had fallen, his head resting in her lap. Her hands were covered in his blood, her heart heavy with a silence so deep it swallowed every sound. All around her lay the aftermath of the fight, empty cartridges glinting in the sand. Horses long gone, the desert eerily still. The riders had fled when more gunfire echoed in the distance, perhaps thinking a larger Apache band was coming. But Koa had not seen them leave. He had given everything to protect her, and now he was still. Evelyn rocked him gently, whispering his name as if it could call him back. "Koa, please wake up. You can't leave me here." Her voice cracked on the wind. No answer came, only the soft rustle of the canyon grasses and the faint call of a hawk overhead. She pressed her forehead to his, tears falling freely. "You said you'd find me," she whispered brokenly.
"So find me now, please." For hours she stayed there until the sun climbed high and the heat began to burn her skin.
Finally, she gathered what strength she had left and began to dig. Her hands blistered, nails torn. But she didn't stop until she'd carved a shallow grave beneath the great mesquite tree overlooking the spring, the place where he had first taught her to listen to the earth. She laid him down gently, wrapped in his blanket, and placed the smooth river stone, the one he'd given her, over his heart. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "You said it meant remembrance. So I'll remember, Koa. Every sunrise, every wind that touches my face, I'll remember you." The wind stirred softly, brushing against her hair like a hand. She closed her eyes, letting herself believe just for a moment that it was him. Then she stood, her body trembling but her spirit unbroken. She didn't know where she would go or how far she could make it, but she knew she had to keep her promise. To live, Evelyn walked for days across the desert, following the river north until she reached the small frontier town of Silver Mesa. The townsfolk stared at her when she stumbled in, clothes torn, sunburnt, her eyes hollow with grief. A kind older woman took her in, gave her water and food and a quiet corner of her home. Evelyn said little, only that she had lost someone dear in the canyon. The woman didn't ask questions. She didn't have to. Weeks passed. Evelyn began to heal, though the ache in her chest never truly faded. At night she would walk to the edge of town and look out at the mountains where the sun dipped low, painting the world in the same gold light she had seen that last morning. One evening, as she stood there, something stirred in the wind. A faint whisper, a voice she could almost recognize. Evelyn. Her heart jumped. She turned sharply, scanning the horizon. Nothing, only the wind sighing through the sagebrush, but she smiled through her tears. "I hear you," she whispered. "I'm still here." Months later, she built a small cabin near the spring. It became her home, a quiet refuge where she painted, grew herbs, and listened to the world the way Koa had taught her. Travelers sometimes stopped by, speaking of an Apache spirit who guarded the canyon. Some swore they'd seen him, a tall warrior with dark hair watching silently from the cliffs whenever strangers entered his land. Evelyn never told them she knew him, that she had loved him, that his heart had taught hers to beat again. Every evening she placed a single white stone by the water's edge, a symbol of remembrance. Each one marked another day she had kept her promise to live. And every dawn, when the light broke over the canyon and the wind whispered through the grass, she felt it again, his presence. Not as pain, not as loss, but as peace. Because love, she had finally learned, was not something that ended. It changed shape like the river winding through the desert, forever flowing, forever finding its way home. And somewhere in that vast silence, Koa's spirit smiled. He had never touched a woman before her, never known the weight and wonder of love. But through her he had learned what it truly meant. And through him, she had learned that love's greatest power was not in holding on, but in never letting go. The dawn shimmered over the canyon and the desert breathed anew. The story of the warrior and the woman became a whisper on the wind, a promise kept, a love that never died.